This question might be easier for some of you because you haven't been alive as long as some of us in this room. But do your best and think back to when you were a child. And here's my question. What did you want to be when you grew up? A nurse?
Teacher.
Teacher?
Doctor.
A cowgirl.
A cowgirl? A what? An actress?
A mom.
A mom. Okay. So, of everyone who just said something, did you end up with that vocation?
Yes.
A mom, yeah, and actress, yeah. So, doc, there we go. You weren't expecting chiropractor.
No, not at all.
No. Well, for me, when I grew up, I mean, like most kids, I always just changed it back and forth. You know, wanting to be a cop, wanting to be, you know, an attorney. Don't ask me why. You know, all these different things. But I still have it. It's downstairs in the rectory, and it is the booklet about what I want to be when I grow up, and with pictures that I drew and everything. And my response was, I wanted to be the President of the United States of America. Now, as a young child, I didn't really realize how stupid an idea that would be. But, you know, I mean, it was probably more realistic than being a, you know, interstellar space fighter, or, you know, which I would have loved. But there was something so unique about the presidents. You know, I mean, yes, I was, you know, born under Nixon, and I vaguely remember the resignation and the transition. But, you know, since then, I mean, I've been following the presidents all along, but there's certain cool things that presidents get to do. I mean, first off, they get these really cool jackets that have, you know, the presidential seal on. They can fly on Air Force One and order anything they want. I mean, they could ban broccoli from the menu of the White House. I mean, imagine as a kid if you could have banned your your least favorite vegetable. It would have been a dream. Mine would have been canned, squeaky green beans. Ugh. But other things too, you could have traveled the world. You can meet some great people, and you got to live in the White House. But I think there would be one thing that would drive me absolute nuts, and that would be the tedious, probably everyday time when you had to stand in a line with a few people and greet people as they came in. You know, you smile. Hi, how are you? Yes, lovely day. You know what that's like. Remember, if you've ever been married or been part of a wedding party and that line, after you're thinking to yourself, is this ever going to end? Well, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, great president, most of us would agree. He hated one specific aspect of his job. And this guy ran a lot of times and won. He hated those lines, those receiving lines. And he would complain to people around him all the time that nobody ever listens to him when they're in that line. I mean, you know, they'd go along and we could start to have a conversation and they'd be like, oh, that's nice, blah, blah, blah. You know, you should have, almost like when in Charlie Brown, when the teacher talks and you hear that, I mean, that's how it would become. And so one day, true story, FDR decided that he was going to do something different. And here's what he did. Every single time he met somebody, he leaned forward and told them and whispered in their ear that I killed my grandmother this morning. No, he said this to everyone. And would you know that everyone who went through was, oh, Mr. President, nice to meet you. Oh, you're doing a great job, Mr. President. Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Nobody listened to him. Nobody. Not one person. They didn't even think about it. Because all they were doing was probably, first off, being an awe meeting the president. But secondly, you know, in a case like that, how often do we listen? And it wasn't until the very end of the receiving line that the ambassador of Bolivia came. And the president did the same thing. He whispered in his ear, he said, I murdered my grandmother this morning. And the ambassador stopped, and he looked, and his response was, well, she must have deserved it. True story. You know, we hear, unless you have an audio impairment, we hear all the time. Hear is actually just a function of our body. I mean, you hear from the moment even you're in the womb, you're hearing noises. They tell pregnant moms to read to their child, play music to their child, become familiar with their voice. You know, we can hear so much. I mean, if I stop, I hear a little piece of paper. Perhaps it's a candy wrapper. I maybe hear somebody tapping their cell phone. I hear a buzzing outside. I hear our ushers talking in the back. But I have to really stop and really stop to hear what these noises are. But if I wanted to listen to whatever the ushers are saying in the back, I would probably have to stop and go back and actually, like, hey guys, what you talking about? And one of them, culprit, belongs to me. We hear, but we don't listen. About 10 years ago, my mother had been complaining for years that my dad's hearing was going. And I agreed, because whenever I would talk on the phone to him, I was like, he would never hear what you were saying. I just don't, maybe he just didn't know how to use the phone. I mean, he's so old. But, you know, it was getting worse. And she begged him to get a hearing test. And so he finally gave in because she made the appointment. And he went and he had the hearing test. And the doctor came and he said, Pastor Hofer, I have some great news. Your hearing is 100% fine. I said, now the bad news is you're going to have to start listening to your wife. We get so wrapped up in ourselves, in our busy lives, in work, in play. If you have, I don't know about Android, but if you have an iPhone, it will tell you at the end of the day your screen time. How much screen time did you use? I just read an article, I don't know if it was in the magazine for New York Times Today or something else, about this person who's a tech person, realized he was addicted to a cell phone. And that would actually hurt his relationship with his wife. Because instead of listening to her, he was always grabbing his phone, always looking. How many times, if you're out and about, do you see people with their cell phones on the table? Or you see a group and they're sitting there and they're all just like going like this. And there's no conversation whatsoever. And when we don't listen, when we intentionally don't listen, we might miss out on news or information or an idea that might totally change our lives and transform us. See, Jesus taught. He often taught in parables. But sometimes his teachings were very, very clear. Last week, you heard the beginning of the Sermon on the Plain. In Matthew's Gospel, it's a Sermon on the Mount, and Luke's, it's a Sermon on the Plain. Just think about it this way. Jesus had a stump speech, and his stump speeches were often used in different places, and he would, change things based on where he was at. So that's why you could have the beatitudes in two different places. But Jesus had just said his version of the beatitudes. And if you really read the beatitudes and take it seriously and listen to what Jesus was saying, that might cause some of us to get a little bit worried and anxious in our lives, because we might not exactly be doing what Christ wants us to do. Immediately after Jesus said the Beatitudes, we get this section of the gospel. So you have this group, a big group. They're all a little worried. Some probably left because they didn't like what he had to say. Some people were mumbling to each other and so didn't actually listen to his words. But a lot of people did listen. And look at the beginning of the passage. Jesus said, "I say to you that listen." Notice he didn't say, "I say to you that hear." I'm speaking to those of you who are actually going to listen to what I have to say. And if you're not going to listen to what I have to say, you might as well just go away. Because what I'm going to tell you, this is going to turn your world upside down. And when you read what Jesus taught about not only countercultural, it seems almost counterhuman. These things that Jesus begs us, if we're going to follow him, if we're really going to be his disciples, we need to love our enemies, do good to those who hate us, bless those who curse us, pray for those who abuse you, turn the other cheek. If somebody takes your coat, give them your shirt. Jesus isn't asking us to be suckers here. Jesus is saying, though, in God. All of these feelings of hate and anger, of not being able to forgive, of greed for things, that in God, none of that's important. What's important is not to judge. Forgive. Be merciful. Be as our Heavenly Father is. You heard that. You listened to that. If you want to be Jesus' disciples, everything we thought we knew or we have become, a lot of it goes completely against what Jesus taught. I'm guilty of a lot of these things, and I'm sure you're probably guilty of a lot of these things too. But the good news about Jesus is that all we have to do is ask for forgiveness. And He forgives us. And it's done. And then we can try again. Maybe the next time we'll get it right. But if we fail again, if we're sorry, God will forgive us. And we try and try again. My sisters, my brothers, we only have a week and a half left until we enter the Lenten season. Over this time, if you're thinking about really putting some thought into what your Lenten discipline might be this Lent. And no, I'm not talking about something like, I love chocolate so much I'm going to give up chocolate. I'm talking about if you really want to turn your life around, if you see that you're going in a wrong direction, then maybe it's time to look at this list. And don't try to do them all at once, because you're not Jesus, and neither am I. But maybe work on one of these. You know, maybe forgiving somebody is something that you really need to work on. There's a lot here. Jesus is speaking. Are we listening?